score has been going down since paying off my debt. It was almost perfect for like the last 3 years. And then now that I've been knocking all the small debts off, it's literally dropped. So my financial status has gotten better and my credit score has gotten worse. I'm just like a regular person. Any other regular person is definitely able to come to that same conclusion and to get it done like I did. All the people that tell you that it's impossible are like working for credit card companies or are so disappointed by their own situation that they don't want to see you succeed.
Welcome back to another episode of the Heart Healthy Hustle Show. I'm your host, Jonathan Frederick. We have Miranda Freeman on the show today. And who is Miranda Freeman, you might be asking yourself? Well, if you follow Dave Ramsey on Instagram, you would know that Miranda Freeman is a very recent Instagram post on Dave's personal Instagram. So Miranda Freeman was going about her life, paying down her student loan when 2 days ago, Dave Ramsey, one of America's most trusted sources for financial advice, reposted her Instagram photo. And correct me if I'm wrong, Miranda, but this photo was an announcement of Miranda paying off $130,000 of student loans in just 3 years. So after Dave Ramsey reposted her photo, it has garnered over 30,000 likes and has a lot of people curious, how'd you do it? So being on my own journey to financial freedom, I wanted to learn from her expertise and experience as much as possible. So I decided to invite Miranda onto the show, and she graciously volunteered to come on and share her story with us. Miranda, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Fill in any gaps from that intro, anything else you'd want the audience to know, maybe where you're at, your age, what you do for a living, things like this.
Yeah, sure. I'm 28 years old. I live in Los Angeles with a ridiculously high cost of living, unfortunately. I went to graduate school for speech pathology, hence the ridiculous student loan debt, and that was in Boston. And then I moved back to Southern California in 2015 and started this debt-free journey.
We start out the show with a favorite success quote or a saying you live by, so share with the audience what you got and what it means to you.
What's the Steve Prefontaine?
Yes. To sacrifice something.
To do less than your best is to sacrifice the gift or something like that. That's one that comes to mind.
Love it. So I'm interested to hear how you started your debt-free journey and the trials that you had to overcome. Did you know coming out of grad school that immediately you would jump on this journey to be debt-free?
It's so funny that you ask that because I've never been somebody who's like been someone to accumulate debt. Like I've never had like carried a credit card balance or anything like that. And yet like I look back and I'm like, wow, I just felt totally okay amassing an immediate 6 figures in student loans. Kind of wish I could go back and smack myself in the face a little bit on that one. But I definitely knew from the beginning that I wanted it gone as soon as possible. I just didn't know exactly what that would look like because I didn't fully, I don't think, understand how much money that is until the time came to start paying it back.
Similar for myself, I think it can relate to a lot of the listeners as well. Many of us are people who understand that credit cards are toxic. They're not to be leveraged or used. Though it feels that student loan debt is something that I've always justified in the back of my mind. If I'm honest, I always thought, well, not that big a deal. Everybody has it. And if they don't, somebody subsidized their entire college career, which good for them, but I'm not that lucky. It seems that is a debt that people really justify. And what happened for me was I was meeting with a financial mentor 3 weeks ago, and he explained to me having debt is actually baggage. And for anyone who's listened to this show for any period of time, you're probably well aware that for me personally, and for my friend group and everything, I strive to eliminate any kind of baggage and to really thrive as I'm pursuing my goals and mission. This being revealed to me that, you know what, your student loan is actually a form of spiritual baggage. I was really taken aback by that. And immediately that was, I've listened to Total Money Makeover, but that to me was really shocking when he said that. I was like, you know what, this is the same, this is baggage. And I was really struck by that.
It's so accurate. I mean, I've never thought of it in those terms before, but like just the immediate kind of crippling feeling of like just a giant chain weighing you down and not seeing any way to get rid of it. It really is. I mean, baggage is the perfect term for that, I think.
So you're 28, you went to grad school in Boston for speech pathology. How are you working in that field now? I assume you graduated recently.
I graduated in 2015 and then I moved again thinking that, oh, hey, I can get rid of this really quickly. I'm going to live with my parents for a year or two and just throw down my parents are wonderful, by the way. The fact that I could live with them for the first 2 years of this was like humongous, because it's very expensive, again, to live in this area. So started working, in like that end of 2015. The job that I got, it's kind of competitive in my field, to be like a medical speech pathologist. So I was lucky, very lucky to get a job through some connections, but the job was like 50 miles away from my parents' house. So I commuted there through LA basically every day for 2 years. And then was wonderful, but I couldn't really take that anymore. And I happened to get a new job at UCLA, where I work now, and I love it. And now I live in Burbank for the last year or so.
Okay. What was the catalyst to you saying, I'm going to get debt free and I'm going to get extreme about it? What happened?
I can't point to like any one thing. I always knew that, again, like I just felt like kind of the immediate crippling feeling from that amount of debt right away. And I knew I wanted it gone. I just didn't know really how to do it, because when you have a volume of debt that's that significant, you really do need a plan. Like it's not, I think Dave Ramsey has a saying that like you can wander into debt, but you can't wander out. And that is so accurate. Like I was always overpaying from the beginning, but I didn't get on a budget or really like cut down bare bones on some of my spending until last year. And then when I did that, got on a written budget, did a few no spend months, took some extra jobs, and then I was able to make a lot of headway very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And on your Instagram post, one of them, it says, I could have done this in literally half the time if I'd found Dave Ramsey sooner. I feel like some people dissuade you from thinking things like that are possible, but it really, really can be if you're willing to work hard and make the right sacrifices. Example, living with your parents and commuting 100 miles round trip on the 5 every day for 2 years, among many others. So you obviously have a great attitude towards your approach to getting debt free. So what I want to do, Miranda, is get extremely tactical now so that the listeners can also apply this to their journey. Personally, as I mentioned, I'm on my own journey to become debt-free. I think the biggest start for me was, again, realizing that it's a form of baggage. And I was like, oh man, that's not good. Because I was like, it'll get, it'll evaporate once I start making this kind of money or whatever the case may be. Yeah, though that might be true. Again, on your Instagram post, $20,000 of your loan was interest. Is that correct?
Yeah, at the end. And I watched that number kind of as I was going, and that I let that motivate me too, to just go as hard as possible.
Yeah, I don't. Compounding interest on the other side of things is not my friend. Obviously, on the good side, it's awesome. So, assuming you are ready and are already pursuing debt freedom with a gazelle intensity, as Dave Ramsey puts it, assuming your mindset is right, how do I set up a financial plan? So, not necessarily a budget, but I've heard you need to be following a plan. So, where did you find your plan? Was it completely just out of your own head? And how can my listeners apply this as well?
Well, I would say like I didn't have a really solid plan for success until last year after reading The Total Money Makeover. Before that, I was just kind of like throwing extra money, but I'd go out to dinner once a week or whatever, and was like spending a lot of money that I probably shouldn't have been, and thought that I was doing a good job because I was working extra jobs. I've said it like several times, but I highly recommend that book, The Total Money Makeover. That's what really got me on track. I think the budget kind of is your plan in a micro sense, like being able to tell every dollar where it's going to go. And then you see what you have left over, and okay, every single penny of this goes to debt. And then the other side of that is your income. So whatever you can do, increase your income, extra jobs. At the end of the day, like it is that simple, like increasing your income and decreasing your expenses.
What's the most extreme example of you decreasing your spending?
Oh, I could probably pull a lot of good examples. I'm at the end of a no-spend January right now.
So what does that mean?
So a no-spend month is basically, when you do your budget at the beginning of the month, writing down all your necessary expenses. So writing down all your necessary expenses.
And just, sorry to cut you off, but can you explain the word necessary for anyone who thinks that?
Absolutely. So like food, shelter, like the things that you have to pay for, like car insurance, what else? Like any pet food or like something like that you can't get away with like without, like you absolutely need it for the month.
Got it.
With my no-spend months, I tend to go like really hard on things like my grocery budget. Like normally I might spend $100 $400 for the month, but like this month I cut that down to $325, things like that. And then literally every single dollar above your bare bones necessary expenses goes to paying off your debt.
Okay, I'm just kind of letting that resonate a bit. So you mentioned the Total Money Makeover. You also mentioned a couple software tools, one of them being Every Dollar. You're saying that the budget is essentially your financial plan. So did you sit down maybe a couple times or in an afternoon and write out, based on my income right now, in this amount of time, I can become debt free because I've also picked up these side hustles and I've decreased expenses over here. I'm going with a no spend month this month. Can you dive into that a bit?
Yeah, exactly. That's something that I didn't do until midway through last year, and it was so beneficial because it is part of that roadmap. And I think what you said with, finding a target date, like when are you hoping to accomplish this by, can be really motivating too. And so I did do that. I got married at the end of September last year. And after that time, we combined our finances. So that was like October 2018. And at that time, we would sit down and do our budget together. And we found that we could just kind of going the same that we were doing, being frugal, things like that, we would be able to finish by June of this year. Well, my husband thought that was kind of like a crazy goal. He's like, we'll never be able to do June 2019. And here we are, January, and feeling pretty good. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
Can you think of any other examples of decreasing spending? I want to figure out how much of your energy was allocated to, okay, I'm increasing my income. Because like you mentioned in the beginning of the interview, you're not really a big, huge spender. You were already frugally minded in a sense. Did you allocate 90% of your attention to where can I increase income, and then 10% to let's keep everything low as bare bones expenses? Or was it more 50-50?
Towards the beginning of this, because it took me about 3 years, towards the beginning and middle, where I wasn't making I make, I know people like numbers. I make about $94,000 a year now. That's my current salary. But I started off 3 years ago around $60,000 for the first year and a half. And at that time, just that being my base salary, I was like, I need to make more money. There's no way I can do this on, even living with my parents, things like that. So I did get a couple per diem jobs in my field and things like that. And then more recently, since getting the job that I have now, I felt like, okay, well, my income, and I do still commute quite a ways for work. So and just mentally, it was difficult to be working multiple jobs for so long. So I quit my extra jobs, and then with the higher salary that I have now, started paying a lot more attention to minimizing my spending. And what that looked like for me was, this is so bad, I'm embarrassed even saying this, but a couple things that I did that I look back and just kind of want to smack myself now are things like getting a latte every day, literally a $5 latte, which is so stupid. For me, it was not aligned with my goals at all. And then the other thing was bringing my lunches to work. It wasn't abnormal for me to spend $5 to $15 a day on lunch. So just bringing my lunch and then taking my coffee budget way down to $50 a month or something like that max. I was able to save $500-$600 a month just doing those things. And then I got so intense about it, for lunch, for instance, you asked about kind of extreme things.
Yeah.
There are days that I would forget my lunch at home, and instead of just going to the cafeteria and spending $5 or whatever, I would be so desperate that I literally wouldn't eat, or I would take grab a pack of free graham crackers or whatever that we have in the hospital just to tide me over, because I was so angry about the idea of spending a few dollars in the cafeteria at that point.
Free graham crackers for the win. So going back, we were talking about how do you set up a financial plan, and you mentioned that the budget essentially is the plan. Can we get a little more detailed here? So we stopped right around where you said, write down all of your necessary expenses. So what's the next step?
I like on Every Dollar that it kind of lists everything out for you. You can add extra categories, but you basically put your income, any money that you're expecting to come in, you put in the planned category. And then, like you said, all the necessary expenses, groceries, mortgage, rent, whatever, cable, water, and then anything extra that you want for yourself. And I definitely recommend budgeting unless you're doing a really intense no spend month, like giving yourself a little wiggle room for like something that's going to bring you joy, I think is really important. Been getting a lot of messages like, how do you stick to like a budget and things like that? And I think just making sure it's something that's like realistic for you. Because when you fail, it's going to be very difficult to get yourself motivated. So if you give yourself a bar that you know you can hit or exceed, it feels great and you want to keep going.
So what was that for you?
Yes, I guess I just meant by that like giving yourself $100 in a miscellaneous category or something like that, rather than saying, oh, every month is going to be a no spend month, I think is what helped me stay on track.
Okay. So for me, Miranda, the biggest thing is one of the biggest factors for me that comes into play every time I start out on a really detailed budget is something will come up. And like you said, maybe you have this much money in a specific miscellaneous fund that can be used for extra lunch out, whatever. I tend to let myself off the hook. Let's say I have $15 left in that and I go out to dinner and it's like $25 or something. I don't eat out a lot. Don't get me wrong. But there's a mental block that I need to install into my brain or something so that I don't let myself off of the hook. So what did it look like your internal dialogue, what did it look like when you said, okay, I can just let this slide $8 over my $100 miscellaneous fund? What's the mindset behind not allowing yourself to go into the red over that amount?
I think that's like the big question for people. And that's a question that I'm getting a lot. And it's hard to like nail down an answer that's like one size fits all. But I think for me, at least, and for probably a lot of people, the times that we get in those situations are times that we're with other people.
Yeah.
So, like a dinner out with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whoever, or your parents, or lunch with coworkers who, you have your lasagna sitting there in the fridge, but they're all wanting to go out. So for me, something that was really beneficial was just being super vocal with my friends and family and coworkers who are also my friends about what I was doing. And hey, I'm doing a no spend month, so I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, Z. And people are really supportive. People who care about you are going to want to see you succeed. And they'll say things like, oh, well, why don't we go? Or at least for me, my lovely friends and coworkers were like, well, why don't we go take a walk instead of get coffee today or something like that? So that you're not even put in those situations. Just saying no is like really difficult, but it's an important skill to learn.
Dave Ramsey says that word a lot in the Total Money Makeover. No. It's interesting. I was just watching a clinical psychologist discuss what this means, and saying no is essentially saying that there is nothing the other person can do to make you go back on your denial of whatever they offered or said. So it's a very aggressive word. And that's why I believe so many of us have trouble with it, is because it's not just, hey, can you please understand this doesn't work for me? It's when you say the word no, it's a very aggressive word because it means you are unshakable in that stance. Would you agree?
Yeah, the absence of any flexibility. And for people like me who tend to be like on the people pleaser side, like it can be really difficult to get in that mindset.
Love it. So let's jump into fostering the right friendships during this time. It's important. And you just mentioned how you had great friends there who would say, oh, let's go for a walk instead of, spending $5 on a daily latte. What's your number one tip then for connecting with others committed to financial freedom? I imagine some of the people in your circle weren't really about it, or were most people very understanding?
People were so understanding and supportive, really beyond anything. I wasn't super vocal about a lot of this stuff until probably over the last 6 months to a year. And I'm so glad that I finally decided to open up, because a lot of people are actually going through really similar things, but nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that they're broke. Like, it's embarrassing. One thing that was super important to me, that was another really difficult mindset to get in, was not caring what people think of your stuff. One of the things that comes with trying to pay down a lot of money towards debt is not being able to have the newest phone or the newest clothes or the nicest car, things like that. And anyone I can only think of 2 people off the top of my head who ever commented on my things not being nice enough for them. And what a great way to find out that, that's not somebody you want.
Goodbye. Yeah.
Yeah, bye. Good luck. But the vast majority of people were so supportive, and like I've gotten so you mentioned like how to connect with people. I had no idea that there was this debt-free community on Instagram, but like the hashtag debt-free community, hashtag debt-free journey. I've been getting literally hundreds of messages and comments, about people who are in the same situation, or the fact that like they didn't think there was a way out, and now they have hope and things like that. Like there's so many people going through the same kind of thing. So it's really, I think, not that hard to make connections if you are open about what you are going through. People will meet you halfway.
So there's a debt-free community on Instagram. What the hashtags were debt-free journey. What was the other one?
Debt-free community. And then hashtag Dave Ramsey's got a ton of activity as well.
Okay. Did you do any meetups or anything like that?
No, I haven't. Like, I didn't know that community really existed. I would like sometimes scroll through just for like inspiration, but I hadn't like connected with anyone. Like I said, I, had a lot of like my friendships and stuff that we were able to bond over things like this. But like, as far as social media, no, not at all. I mean, now that I'm realizing that there's so many people, I think it's a great way to connect and to help people going through similar things. But I really I've gained like, I don't know, like 1,500 followers in like a couple days.
Well,
so it's all kind of new.
Yeah. I know some people are wondering, how did you vocalize it? How do you recommend people vocalize to your circles of friends, your family, and really just come out of the dark with this? That is nothing to be ashamed of, but see what happened. I speak on this quite often on the show, on the self-awareness side of things, is that secrecy, this is actually a quote from one of the past guests, Dr. Rob Reamer, secrecy begets shame. So even if it's nothing to be ashamed of, when you're secret about it, you're telling yourself subconsciously that there's something here that other people aren't also dealing with, that maybe you are the only one, and you've seen that that's completely false. So how do you recommend people vocalize to their friends, their family, that they're on this journey and they're really sticking to it?
I mean, it was so it came so easily for me in like my small circle that like I can't even really remember. I mean, literally just I'm working on paying down my student loans or something like that, or I have massive student loans from grad school. Buying a house is going to be put off for a while because of that, or whatever. But it really was like so casual. Like it wasn't like a big deal, so casual. And like I said earlier, like 99% of the people are supportive and or going to tell you that, they're going through something not too different.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that's going to help a lot of people. The biggest key then, you mentioned on your Instagram post here as well, was getting a written budget. And then you said, I overpaid my loans each month from the very beginning, but I didn't start to make real headway until I figured out where all my money was going and how I could tighten things up. I've looked into this quite a bit. I know you mentioned Dr. Thomas Stanley's book, The Millionaire Next Door. Good read, classic. I also like The Millionaire Mind for mindset around that. There's other financial experts out there who will say the huge difference isn't going to be the latte.
Mm-hmm.
So, with you have a substantial income now with your career. What were the things? Like, did you have a car payment? Like, what were some of the things outside of the daily small things like your daily lattes? Or was it really just an aggregate effect with all of those micro purchases?
I think the latte is like the microest micro purchase. And like for me, that was, a few $100s a month is like, to me, that's a lot. That's like over, thousands of dollars a year. But eating out, I think, is a huge one that we really don't even realize. Like once I got on a written budget, and I magically had like $800 extra that had just been going to like restaurants and even just like, fast stuff like at lunch and things like that it just like almost, makes you sick if you think about it too long. But I did not have any other debt. So that was really helpful. I drive a pretty old beat up car. And so I didn't have a car payment, didn't have I guess there was definitely some big things along the way, big choices that led to big savings. Like, for instance, like I did get married in September, like I said, and like, I always wanted kind of a big wedding, a big local wedding with all my friends and family. And when we wrote down all the guests that we would invite, it's 200 people, and that was like our short list. So we just kind of did the numbers and we're like, oh my gosh, like we can't spend that much money on one day. So we did a tiny destination wedding in Aruba instead. And it was so beautiful and fun. And we probably saved like $40,000. So I guess when you think about it like that, no, the lattes aren't going to come close. But I do think the small purchases are important to watch as well.
Yeah, eating out being a big one. Okay, you follow Dave Ramsey to the T. Is that accurate?
I followed a lot. I would say like some people would probably call it like Dave-ish, that community. But there was a couple things that I didn't do that were smart, I think, for me, and some that were dumb. Like, for instance, in my head, was like, oh, the debt avalanche makes more sense. So, paying off the debts with the highest interest rate first versus the smallest remaining balance, which is called the debt snowball. I'm sure you know that.
Explain the debt snowball.
Sure. So the debt snowball is paying off your debts in order of the lowest remaining balance. So if you had like $1,000 credit card balance versus $6,000 left on your car, regardless of the interest rate, you would pay the credit card balance first with all of your extra money before throwing your extra money at the car payment.
Okay. And then it just, as a snowball gathers snow rolling down a hill, therefore you're paying off your debt faster and faster, right?
Yes. And the psychological benefit that comes with crossing those small debts off the list, I think is so, so, so important. Looking back from the beginning, I definitely was doing the avalanche just because I thought it made more mathematical sense. But I think the avalanche being when you pay off the debt with the highest interest rate first so that you save the most money. And sure, if you only have $1,000 to pay or $500 or $100 or whatever to pay towards debt a month, that does seem to make the most mathematical sense. But we are humans and we have things like motivation and that can change and increase based on the benefit that we see from what we do. So when you're when you're crossing those small debts off the list, you get more motivated, you pick up more jobs, you're tighter on your budget. I'm saying you, but me specifically. So looking back, I think I would have been, that's one of the things, if I started with the snowball instead of the avalanche from the very beginning, I think I would have been able to finish this a lot sooner than 3 years.
Wow. So you initially were doing an avalanche approach, attacking the highest interest rate loans first?
Mm-hmm. And it just felt like such slow going because I had like 4 loans that were over $20,000 each at like 6.8 and 6.4%. And you just can't. And especially with my salary, only being like $60,000 a year, even not having rent and things like that, it just felt like such slow going. In retrospect now, whereas like at the end of this, I was crossing off loans, every 2 weeks I had another one to cross off or, close to that. And I was so motivated. I did more no spend months. I got tighter on my budget, stopped doing anything extra, and finished 5 months early. So that was definitely one thing that I didn't do that I wish I'd done from the beginning. I'm
glad to hear that. So really just following the plan is very important.
Yeah. But then another thing that I just like wasn't as big of an issue for me is like, I've never just personally had a problem with credit cards. I definitely think there's something, there's a little bit of research on the pain of paying, I think is what they call it, is less when you use a credit card and worse when you use cash. But I never really felt the need to like cut up my credit cards or lock them away or anything like that. I have a couple like recurring purchases or recurring bills, like my dog's like vet insurance and things like that just comes right out of my credit card. And then if I have any big purchases that I have to make that I talk about with my husband beforehand, I'll put those on my credit card and just pay them off immediately. And that's something that probably if you were strict Dave Ramsey, people would say, don't do that.
100% agree. I heard that when you hand somebody the plastic, the tangible effect of it being plastic, but combine that with the fact that you get to have that card back, there's a psychological feeling of you didn't actually lose anything, whereas when you hand them cash, it's gone. Right, exactly. And I think that's I'm pretty sure there's like a few studies recently on that. And I definitely agree. Like I used my credit cards more often in the beginning and middle of this whole process. And
I definitely think there was so much more mindful spending because I just didn't really have to think about it as seriously. And I use my debit card now because it's, for the most part, just easier. But I think, in the beginning, before I really understood kind of like the nuances there, I was definitely affected by kind of the easy feeling of just sliding up the plastic card across the table.
Yeah, there is a lot to that. And there's a reason that these lenders target people, even teens now, for getting brand loyalty, and especially college students and then young adults coming out of college into the workforce. They really target us because they want us to become lifelong, essentially employees to them as the lender. And
Right.
Dave Ramsey does a great job in the Total Money Makeover of showing you that you are a slave to the lender, and the verbiage he uses, the way he explains it, just straight to the point. He's not wrong. And if you have, dignity and integrity, you don't want to feel indebted to anyone. You don't want to, there is something that is internal within humans, I believe, that we don't want to be enslaved to a lender or anyone. And so I think that getting out of debt is a way to break free of those chains.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And the whole industry, just the industry of debt and a credit score and things like that it feels so predatory because you're in this world where they tell you, that your credit score is the most important thing. And that's how you get an apartment, and that's how you get a house, and that's how you get a car, and all those things. My credit score has been going down since paying off my debt. It was almost perfect for the last 3 years. And then now that I've been knocking all the small debts off, it's literally dropped. So my financial status has gotten better and my credit score has gotten worse. If that tells you, how much you should be really worrying about that kind of thing.
Yeah. What I try to do, Miranda, with my show is give tactical tips and insight into people who've actually already done. There's a lot of, I want to touch on this in a minute as well. There's a lot of entrepreneurial type of people listening, people who actually own businesses, and then people who are starting something to increase their income. And when you look at the financial system as a whole, I'm not an expert at all. So guys, take anything I say with a grain of salt. That's why I have people like Miranda on who've actually done it. 130,000 in 3 years. All right. So listen to what she has to say. I want to be able to understand, and not in a unethical manner, but work the system that is presented to us as this is the world you live in, and you will subscribe to all of these credit scores and this card and this, that, and the third, and where you can look at that, take out all of the ambiguity, understand it, and work that system in reverse, so to speak, instead of being exploited, and then realize that that's actually, yes, there are certain aspects of the world that do work under that subscription umbrella, but you don't have to subscribe to it wholeheartedly and feel helpless. Personally, I don't want any of my listeners to feel exploited or be exploited by a lender or in any manner. So I feel that finances is nothing to be ashamed of. If you have yourself in a tough spot right now, start opening up about it, start talking about it, start thinking as debt-free will be your new reality, because you can do it, and there's nothing to be ashamed of if you are in debt. And specifically for those of us who have any student loans left, it's something that, Miranda, you mentioned you garnered over, I think it was $20,000 of interest in just a couple years, right?
Yep, $20,000.
So that stuff adds up very quickly, and it can snowball in the other way. So, you mentioned, can you give us, remember the numbers on if you used your whole payback period versus the fact that you did it quicker, what the difference in cost would have been?
Oh my gosh. So the repayment term I initially selected was 10 years. And that's the shortest one that they offer, I think. I mean, you're welcome to pay them faster, but there's a 25-year income-based repayment, or I did the 10-year and obviously finished it in 3. I mean, I have to imagine it would have been over double that if I'd taken the whole time. I mean, it had to, I'm sure it would have been. I looked at those at one point, but it honestly just made me sick. So I let it just make me afraid, and then shut that window and didn't open it again.
So explain, if you're willing, explain what you mean it made you sick, so people can really get the visceral nature of what it takes to get out of debt.
Sure. So looking at the beginning, when you see, okay, they give you, the education calculators, whatever that you look at, and you see, okay, if I pay this amount, I'll finish this time and this much will be interest. I think I've never like financed a car, but I think it's like they do the same kind of things when you're like getting a car loan. You know, if you choose a 3-year term, you end up paying this much overall, or with a mortgage as well. And seeing the numbers that high, I mean, it's not a house that we're talking about. Like, it's not a car. It's invisible. My education is something that, you know, it's great, but I didn't need to spend that money. I don't have anything really to show for it except for a degree that I could have gotten getting, you know, somewhere cheaper. And yet I'm accruing all of this interest from the federal government that could literally buy me, I mean, just in the 3 years, a nice new Ford Fiesta or something like that. But yet I'm driving around a 2007 Honda with scratches all over it. And when you think of that kind of like, that just makes me physically ill to feel like profited on and just feel like I'm losing that money. I mean, I know I signed up for it. Like, I signed on the dotted line, but I didn't fully understand it at the time. And I don't think a lot of people really do until it's too late.
So you're setting up a foundation now, breaking free of this system that could have perpetuated itself throughout a lifetime in terms of debt, in terms of loans. But you're breaking out of that so that you can then create wealth long term.
Absolutely.
Talking about building wealth, in terms of investing then, there are many of us who believe, for me, I'm very proactive, okay? I'll give you guys an insight into myself with finances. I have been so restless is the word, towards wanting to build wealth and understanding patience is there, and all these things. So I looked into a Roth. I looked into something called Wealthfront. I looked into all this stuff, and I started investing, but I still was carrying some debt. And again, my financial mentor, shout out to him if he hears this interview, I really appreciate him. He shared with me, pause all of those things until you're out of debt. You know, understanding that while you're in the journey to get out of debt, you're not just wasting money here and there. You're actually very focused, dedicated, following a budget, all these things. And I found that to be interesting because I even have people who will then say, well, what about a Roth IRA? Because the compounding, if I just max that out each year, and then the compounding is going to fight the adverse effects of the debt compounding interest. So what's your take on or beliefs on investing before you're out of debt?
That is such a great question. And I think it's like person to person. But for me, I mean, I felt like my debt was an absolute like emergency. It was not something that I was going to take 10 years to repay or anything like that. I knew I wanted it gone ASAP. And so what investing looks like for me was not doing it. I'm forced, I have a mandated like 9.5% out of my paycheck towards a pension that I have to contribute towards. But other than that, I stopped every single thing. I took my savings down to $1,000. And now that it's all paid off, I plan on opening a Roth in the near future and things like that. And really, I don't feel like I lost, so much time. It was just a few years. I'm only 28. And I think if you do have the mindset that your debt is an emergency and you plan to pay it off as soon as you possibly can, the motivation that you can gain from throwing the extra money that you would have invested towards your debt instead is just going to help keep you on track and keep you focused and get to the end goal faster. And then you have the rest of your life to build wealth.
That's approach I'm subscribing to now as well. Because again, I looked at it like, hey, I'll be able to kind of beat the system and have my Roth working for me while I'm working on my debt. And it's counterintuitive. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of people have trouble with that. That's a bit of a sticking point, especially for people who have an income. They're proactive. They're not just wasteful. They really want to get ahead. The best approach is to realize that the debt is something that will take a fight and will take a lot of dedication to. Miranda, on the show, we do have what I call the Heart Healthy Hustle Round. It's a series of rapid fire questions, 3 categories, including heart, health, and hustle. So I'll ask you, are you ready for the Heart Healthy Hustle Round?
Yes, 100%.
Heart. So what activity do you use to care for and strengthen your internal character?
I would say, I read a ton. Like, I just read all the time, a ton. And then I'm also a writer. So those 2 things are really important for me.
Health. How do you maintain your physical health and avoid burnout?
That's something that I'm always working on. I'm the kind of person who I'll get into a routine and I'll run, I've run marathons in the past and things like that. And then I'll get out of a routine and, not walk more than 100 feet for like 3 weeks straight. which is not true because I'm very active at my job, but I walk my dog every day. That's good exercise. I love like lifting weights, yoga, running, things like that. But I just say the consistency for me is not something that I'm super good at.
The last category is hustle. I want you to dig deep here and give the listeners an answer that they can really, anything you say I'm sure will relate to, but what's your main motivation? So I'll ask you in terms of your life first, your life purpose. You know, you're in a career field that really requires having a heart for others and wanting to really help people. I can definitely tell you're a giving type of person. You really have a generous spirit about you. So I'm wondering, what's your main motivation for doing what you do?
I think for the last few years, it's really been crushing this debt. And I think it's funny that like all the things in my life can point back to like my financial health, but I really feel like it's true because if you are financially healthy and you feel like at ease with, the state of your finances and things like that, things like nurturing your relationship or having children or retiring and spending time with your family, like that stuff all can be maximized when your finances are in order. So that's been like a huge motivating factor for me. And I think now I have, some other financial goals that I'm working towards. And so that will probably continue to be the theme of, what gets me up in the morning.
I was speaking with a guy named Michael Isom. He's the founder of Vault AIS. He basically builds investment vehicles for really succeeding entrepreneurs who are crushing it and are, surpluses of cash pouring in and they're not sure what to do with it, but they want to maintain control of their assets. So Michael shared, he's a co-author as well with Garrett Gunderson of the book called What Would the Rockefellers Do? The book is fantastic, I've heard, and also I've had him on the show, both of them, so I trust them. And I was speaking with Michael, and I think something that came up was when you have the knowledge that your finances are taken care of, and you don't have to think about, I still have $30K in debt for my student loan, or I still have a credit card or 3 or 4, whatever the case may be, with 1,000 here, 3,000 there. When you realize that all that is gone, and in fact you are wealth building now, and you're not getting into further debt, and you're really proactive with your finances, that can truly, like on a spiritual plane, set you free and actually allows you to then think more abundantly towards, and I don't mean to sound too esoteric here, when you get out of debt, it's like when you are able to start building assets that are going to propel you into the future, as opposed to kind of feel like something's clawing at your back, trying to hold you back from really succeeding. Like you mentioned, Miranda, you can start to really focus on the things in your life, relationships, building a family, whatever the case may be, without that added strain or deterring stress factor of, I can't really do that until maybe 5 years from now. Luckily, I'll have a job that I can pay off my debt. Like that won't be a thing. And you'll just be able to feel like this calming sense of, although control and certainty is kind of an illusion to a degree, you can take control and be proactive and can do things to get rid of your debt and live the life that you want, as opposed to always having this weight on your shoulders. And it can free you up then as an entrepreneur or somebody who's working really hard on your job, and maybe you're building something on the side, like you enjoy writing. You are able to then focus on that. It can give you a new life.
Right.
It can kind of give you like a new life into those things where you're like, I earned the opportunity to sit here and write for a while and really delve into this field and really give my day job my all, because I have no 10% of back mind energy going towards, my debt, it's stressing me out. I really like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, it's emotional freedom. And then once you have that, once you have everything where you want it, it's all kinds of freedom. You can make whatever choice you want. You can completely switch careers. You can go move to Asia or whatever you want to do because you don't have anything weighing you down. You're completely light and free.
So what was the feeling that you had the first time you realized you were debt free?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there wasn't like a big switch, because I think like what you were kind of just saying a second ago, it's like once you're in the mindset, like the stress kind of goes away and you can feel like more, you feel, or at least for me, I felt more in charge of my life once I knew, hey, I have a plan. And as soon as I realized that, the plan is done, I finished, I made my last payment, I started thinking about the next step, which is, emergency fund or bigger emergency fund and things like this.
I love that because that goes back to, and I'm not a New England fan. I know the Super Bowl is next week, but Tom Brady, Coach Belichick, they talk about, do your job and how, the Saints, I don't know if anyone listening to this watched the playoffs in the NFL. Do you watch football, Miranda?
Not just college.
So the New Orleans Saints were set up to totally win their playoff game, and their wide receiver and Drew Brees, they made a big play. They were I think it was a wide receiver, two wide receivers. They were, after the catch, they were like dancing and celebrating. They didn't even score, and they ended up losing the game. Now, it can be argued that there was a really bad call because that is true, but that doesn't guarantee they would have won without that bad call. The point is they were doing what they were hired to do, which is make big plays and do things towards the victory of their team winning, and they were celebrating in advance. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with celebrating once you attain, the victory, but I love your answer there because you didn't really delve into I arrived. You were like, okay, what's next? That's what I set out to do. I accomplished my goal. Now I'm going to accomplish the next goal. So that's a great approach. Very proactive. I admire that approach.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's and when you are, it takes a lot of energy and planning and motivation and stuff to accomplish a goal, getting rid of your debt, however big or small it is. And then that doesn't just disappear. It's one of the benefits of working so hard is you have all of this dedication and energy, and you just want to put it towards the next thing.
Love it. So another question about the debt. How did living within your means positively affect your outlook on life? Driving I think it was a 2007 Honda, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So how did that positively and even negatively affect your outlook on life?
I think it was so overwhelmingly positive. Things I just made a post on this yesterday, but just the getting out of the mindset of keeping up with the Joneses and just being number one, happy with what you have. So I've become somewhat of a minimalist, actually. I got rid of, this is before the Marie Kondo blow up, but I've got rid of a lot of things, donated tons of my clothes. I think I have 10 shirts in my closet, something like that. And just being happy with what I have, whatever the price tag was on it, number one. And then number two is realizing that your possessions do not define your worth at all. So we live in a society that puts a lot of emphasis on what you own. And I think it's way more important, and something that I learned is that the emphasis should be on who you are and the way that you treat people. And I think this whole debt journey has really, really reinforced in me the fact that what you own does not matter, and it has no bearing on your worth or self-worth at all.
Hashtag debt-free journey. Right on. So share with us your 3 most influential books. I know you said you read all the time. So share with us some books that affected your mindset in the beginning of this journey and then really gave you some really strong tactical insights as you were on the journey.
Sure. Well, I have to recommend The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas J. Stanley. It's totally, it's just it was mind blowing to me because you think that everyone with nice stuff must be doing so well, but oops, they're actually mostly not. And the person down the street might be doing much better than the person with the Lamborghini. So that was one. Definitely Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. I could not have done the last leg of this without reading that. And then I read a lot of fiction, but have you heard of Suze Orman?
Yeah, I've heard of her.
One book, I have mixed feelings about it, but as far as personal finance books, she wrote one called Young, Fabulous, and Broke that is, appealing to kind of my demographic. And I think there was things that I liked about it and things that I didn't like about it. But it's probably just a good reminder to, continue thinking critically about anything you read and making your own decisions. But those were definitely my 3 top personal finance books that I read in the last year.
Are there any others?
Those not that I would probably recommend.
So again, those books were Millionaire Next Door by Thomas J. Stanley, Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey, and then Susie Orman's book, Young, Fabulous, and Broke. You said there were some things in that book you didn't like?
Well, like one thing she said, I mean, that is a great, I think more so than those other two for like, it's like a how-to type thing. Like, it's like, these are what the different, these are the basic investment terms and things like this. This is a growth stock, things like that. And this is an index fund. Like, these are the different types of index funds, like things like that. So that was super helpful. But she also like encourages the use of like credit cards and like stuff like that I probably wouldn't totally agree with, or at least weren't, in my situation, the best thing to do.
I could be wrong, but I feel like she's slightly intertwined with the industry in terms of, hey, if you're going to get a credit card, get this one, something like that. Maybe not. Those are great books to get involved in and start shifting your mind to more of a financial freedom mindset. And, you can get these books on audiobook as well. The Millionaire Next Door, I rented from my library, and they have a free audiobook version. So I listen to it that way while I'm driving. It's really helped me to hear somebody read it with the voice intonation and inflections and things like that to really drive it home. So that's another approach you can do, as opposed to, you can always go to triplehAudiobook.com and get a free Audible book from Audible, but Audible can be pretty pricey. So check out your library system first and see if they have these books, even in paperback copies as well. Saves yourself some money there. There's a couple books that I want to read. I've touched on Your Money or Your Life, and also Unshakable, I heard, by Tony Robbins, is really good. Did you hear anything about those?
Is Tony Robbins the guy that's like into like MLMs? Does he do like those seminars?
I don't know what that is. Well, he does like personal development, yeah.
Okay. Multi-level marketing is what?
Oh, no. So I think a lot of multi-level marketers attend his seminars sometimes just because of the nature of that kind of field, but he is become very articulate in the financial world because he's got close friends with really heavy hitters like Ray Dalio and some other very well-known, basically financial pioneers, if you will. So that book is very tactical as well, I've heard. Jumping into your favorite tech and software tools, you mentioned EveryDollar. So I think that's everydollar.com. I actually have that. One issue with that is if you have so I wonder your approach to this, Miranda. If somebody is saying, well, I have income, it's not a set amount of income each month, so how can I budget it?
What I've heard, that's a super good question. I think on Dave Ramsey, like there's blogs on his website that I think address this question. My paycheck is pretty fixed. I'm salary, so it's like pretty consistent. But one thing that I've heard people do too is like budget. So get a month ahead. So like the money that you earned in January is the money that you're using for your February budget. So if that's financially realistic for you, so that if you can get a month ahead and then you know exactly how much you have for that next month, it kind of takes away that being a problem.
Can you say that one more time? I may have missed that.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm probably not explaining it very well. So one thing that I've heard people do when they have this issue of like an inconsistent income is, number one, I guess you should be thinking about, making sure that you have a backup, like emergency fund that's big enough to supplement any big gaps. And then number two, if you can try to get a month ahead on your budgeting so that the paychecks that you earned in January are what you're using as as the income in your February budget. So any money that you're earning in February is actually going to your March budget. And that way you know exactly what you're dealing with.
For software tools, do you use anything else? Do you use Excel spreadsheets? Have you used, EveryDollar you mentioned? Is there anything else?
I probably would have done, like my mom is obsessed with her like Excel spreadsheet and all of her finance stuff, but I probably would have used something, except for all my student loans were in the exact same place. And it really, there's a bunch of different loans, but you log into the SAD Fed loan website and they're all right there. So I didn't really feel like to come up with some fancy spreadsheet or anything like that.
Yeah, it is. I love the adjective. That's a very good word there. SAD. Yep. Well, if you ever write a book one day on becoming debt free, you should use that as an acronym, like the SAD the SAD Fed loan website. So favorite ways then of increasing and or supplementing your income during this time? You mentioned you were doing some things in addition to your day job. Yes,
I worked per diem at a skilled nursing facility. So I'm a speech pathologist. So you have opportunities to make like pretty good hourly wages at per diem jobs. So I worked at a SNF here and there for a big chunk of that time. And then I haven't talked about this at all, but selling stuff it can be another big thing, especially like in the beginning. If you feel like you can't get going, like look around your life for what you can sell. And even if it's like $20, like, hey, that's $20 towards your debt. So my husband has been lately getting really into like Craigslist and eBay and things like that. And he's actually made like, $500 or something like that selling stuff that we would have just donated anyway. So that's another way to kind of get a small income stream going.
So there's somebody listening that is making a good salary. Maybe they also have commission on top of that. And they are proactive. They have a great job, a great career right now. Everything's going smoothly. Maybe they have a car payment, but they make the payment. Maybe they pay over every now and again just to be proactive towards that debt. For somebody who's listening who is allowing themselves to carry maybe some student loans or even just a credit card that they say they'll get to it, what would you share with them to say, hey, you're making income, you have a great job, you're not hurting for money. Why are you allowing yourself to carry that debt? For anyone who is saying or justifying that carrying of maybe it's like, 30 to 50K of a student loan, what would you share with them?
Well, I think number one, and this is something like I guess I just want to say in general, and I always try to like work this into some conversation if it's like a friend asking me for advice or things like that. It's like, number one, you can do whatever you want to do. But for someone who would come to me asking for advice about that, I would say, number one, look at that interest, because especially when we're talking about a credit card, that is going to be a sizable amount of extra money that you're paying. And then number two, just to consider the way that kind of interest and just the money in general is impacting your ability to build wealth. So think about if you were able to invest all the money that you're spending in interest on that credit card or car, whatever it is, where you could be in 10 years with that money. And it's not an insignificant amount. Even if we're just talking like one car loan, or you said, 30 to 50K, like that amount of interest, like invested now could be a sizable amount of money in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Thinking long-term could be really helpful in that situation.
That's really good insight. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's any other questions. Someone's like, oh, ask her this. Is there any question that you get a lot since you were on Dave's, particularly since Dave posted your picture the other day?
Some people, and I feel very fortunate. Like there was a lot of things that I had working in my favor, like parents who were happy to post me complaining for 2 years and things like that. But I think it's just a huge misconception in general. Like I've gotten a lot of messages and comments about like, oh, your husband must be rich. Like you must be a million, you must look at all her vacations and things like that. And I would just want to tell the person that you really can do it. I mean, you don't know someone from social media, for one thing. Like my husband makes less money than I do. And like, if I were rich, I wouldn't need to have taken out 6 figures in, student loan debt. But I'm just like a regular person who just decided that I didn't want to deal with this like crippling debt. And any other regular person is, definitely able to come to that same conclusion and to get it done like I did.
What's exciting you now, Miranda? What are your next financial steps?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited, first of all, to have a real big emergency fund. That's going to be so awesome. My husband and I both have really secure jobs, but just having a little extra money in the bank for, just God forbid, if something happened to one of us or something like that, is going to feel so great. We're going on a vacation. We're planning on going on vacation later this year to Iceland.
Nice. Oh, that'll be awesome. Iceland, I've heard so many amazing things about.
Yes, I'm super excited. And then actually one thing that just occurred to me, people talk about like cost of living a lot. And that's one thing that's been really tough for me, like living in LA. And, I love my job. I want to be working close to it for many years to come. And I don't work very close to there right now. Probably not sustainable, like long-term, the commute that I have right now. And the idea of like buying a house in California is like absolutely absurd. Like the homes with good schools near my work are literally like, you can get like a tiny 3-bedroom condo for like $850 or something like that. So that's something that I've struggled with, like the idea of, needing to potentially leave a job that I love within an area where my family is very close, but because as you know, that's coming up, the idea of saving for a house and things like that. You know, I'm really excited that the debt is gone and that's so cool and all these things that I'm looking forward to, but it's kind of also like a looming question mark, like how are we going to be able to afford a home? So I'll keep you posted on that one.
Yeah, we'll have you back on, a couple years and see how everything's going for you guys. I'm sure it'll be going great.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So the last question before we go, I ask you, is called the park bench paradigm. So I'll set up this scenario for you, Miranda. Let's say you are walking in a park, maybe in LA. You're sitting on a park bench and you're looking out over like a lake or a pond. And your present day self is walking down the path at the park, peaceful Sunday afternoon, and you see your younger self sitting alone on the bench looking out over the water. Maybe you're in a restless period of time, maybe early 20s, whatever. If you can go back in time there, thinking on what you're going through, how you're feeling. If you could go back in time, sit down on the bench, put your arm around your own shoulder as your present day self, what would you tell your younger self and why?
Wow, that's like such a great question and like almost has me feeling like a little bit emotional. I've been really lucky. Like I think I mean, a lot of the things in my life, even the bad things have been, I think, worth going through and the lessons that I learned from them. So I wouldn't change any of those things. And I don't mean to just bring it back to only finances, but there was a couple things, like taking it probably, I should have taken out less loans. And this is something I've come back to a lot of times too. Like I should have been like bare bones in grad school, living like I was broke, never going out to eat, things like that. And I would have been able to finish the things a lot sooner. And that is something that I definitely would change because I don't think anything great came from me starting with 6 figures of debt instead of 5 figures of debt. So it's pretty important.
Yeah. And many people do share a similar response to that. They'll say things like, well, I wouldn't really change anything. Let's say then, maybe not directly to yourself, Miranda, but then to another younger person or someone, even older than yourself who is in a tough spot financially right now. Maybe they have told themselves the lie or agreement that they can't get out of debt because they only make $45,000 a year and they have a family they are supporting and all these hard hate to say not that family is a burden, but they have all these responsibilities that they feel very weighed down by, perhaps financially. And what would you like to say to that person?
Oh, I mean, it's just, it sounds maybe like disingenuous coming from me because I specifically, we didn't get married because of this. Like we didn't have children because of this. Like we were in a position where we could put those things off. But like I said earlier, I'm just a normal person. And like, there are normal people who have different situation than me, more responsibilities, like you said, but you really, really, really can do it. It's not impossible. All the people that tell you that it's impossible are like working for credit card companies or are so disappointed by their own situation that they don't want to see you succeed. And I would also tell them to read the Total Money Makeover because that book really changed my financial outlook. And I think probably the rest of my life.
Well, Miranda, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I know it's going to help all of my listeners. Everyone who hears this will be benefited, whether they're already financially free or are on the path or haven't yet commenced down the path of being debt-free. Again, guys, keep in mind, if you are the entrepreneurial type, that being debt-free before you get into owning your own business, things like that, is important. You don't have to take my advice. Again, I try to learn from people who've done it before, people who know what they're saying, have moral authority in that regard. But again, from what I've learned and from what I've been seeing, being debt-free is a great foundation and a great habit to perpetuate down the path of your life as you walk down that financial path. So Miranda, thanks again for coming on. And how can my audience connect with you?
I mean, I didn't have people wanting to connect with me before, but I mean, I'm on Instagram, Miranda Free, MIRANDAFREEE. And I've been getting tons of messages and comments on there, and I'm happy to chat and share my journey there, tips, things like that. So that would probably be the best way, because we're 21st century now.
Right on. So that's Instagram, and that's at Miranda Free with 3 E's.
Yep.
All right, Miranda, thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
What did you think of the experience?
Oh my gosh, you carry yourself so well. I like how, I'm a big podcast listener. I like how you don't, the thing that drives me crazy in podcasts is when people are always interrupting each other. You know what I mean? So I feel like you making sure that I had like extra time and things like that was super helpful. I mean, it felt like it flowed really well. So nice work. Speech pathology approved.
Congratulations on making it to the end of this episode. What about this episode stood out to you? Next, I need your help sharing this show. I want this podcast to impact and reach 6,000 people per episode by August 31st, 2019. And I want us to reach 15,000 people per month by March 29th, 2020. Have you been enjoying multiple episodes of The Heart Healthy Hustle? I'm thrilled to share with you an exclusive invitation to join our new Facebook community. To get to know other Heart Healthy Hustlers, simply go to thehearthealthyhustle.com/Facebook, where you can expect to see different members of our community being featured weekly in Facebook Live calls. I appreciate all of your love and support, and I will see you in the next episode. As always, be generous on every occasion. There is a story for you, and live wide open.